The Angelic Hero, December 13, 2024, 4:43 a.m. Part 3. Urgency of action. This concept that we cannot just be waiting around for things to happen. There must be an overall sense of urgency, yet how do we balance that with the sustainability of life? The realization, let's talk about this more. The world could be going in a direction, going off a cliff, full speed, and we wouldn't exactly know whether or not that is the case because we don't really know exactly what it looks like for the world to perish. Of course, it's not that difficult to make assumptions and to start weighing possibilities, but we don't exactly know. Perhaps any time that in any condition, if a human species were to seek after artificial intelligence, perhaps that in most cases yields disaster, or perhaps we're destined for ecological collapse, regardless at this point. And even though we think there are ways to solve it, or we think that it's not a big deal, perhaps all of the cards have been placed already and the outcome is already set. I think that is not possible to know. So, in all sense, urgency is not possible to know. Should we be acting like there is no tomorrow? Should we be doing things so that if the time comes in 2 weeks that we must be ready, then we should work to be ready? It is one of those things which we cannot know when our action and what we are preparing for is needed. And so it comes down to a sort of probability where we should most likely live every day as though there is not tomorrow. Guaranteed. We should act steadfast in efforts with the possibility that things are that we are heading off the cliff by default. The attractor states are currently not in anyone's best favor. In general, it seems like because there are certainly possibilities of devastation related to weapons of mass destruction, related to ecological items, related to artificial intelligence. Likely the book Precipice, although I have not read that book, likely discusses a lot of these main ideas: biological, areas. So, some of these great existential concerns are there and are meaningful and definitely have merit. And so, how urgent should our response, planning, action be against those things? This is where obviously it's impossible to know. Does that mean that we should act faster because we cannot know, or act slower? Which is better to assume? I suppose just off of a basic analysis, if there is some likelihood that the world completely ends because weapons of mass destruction are released and the world entirely and the earth entirely explodes, which is certainly a probability, a possibility, then it would be probably less of an assumption to assume. It would be a situation where one could assume that it will never happen, therefore not do too much about it. Assume that it will happen and then do what you can to stop it. There's no point in assuming that it won't happen. That seems, of course, then one could go down the route of creating all sorts of existential crises. But there seems to be little point in assuming that things are not going to happen, but rather say that there's some probability that various of these highly negative outcomes are possible, and therefore the response should be action. And rather than, and because we cannot know, that does not mean that we slow down. That only means that we should speed up, I suppose, because the fact that we don't know if it's actually that possible or not means that we really have little control over the situation, which means that things are more volatile than would be preferred in order to make a adequate assessment of timing. And therefore, it seems in general that the angelic hero should embody this idea of urgency, of planning ahead. Many times in corporate situations today, or in the world in general, things are put off. Things are not planned for. The future sort of happens, and most of the time people are responding to that. It seems likely that an angelic hero should not be one that is constantly responding to the issues going on, but are setting the path and are planning for the path and have various meaningful paths that they can take based on situations and how events actually play out. And that urgency should be in the forefront. That they should be steadfast, doing all that they possibly can to make themselves the best person possible and the world around them the best it can be. But how does one balance this with the sustainability of life, with relaxing when one needs to relax, when taking the time to go through multiple iterations of a story, of a production, in order to get to the final result, which will yield the best results? For example, in this current situation where I am transcribing my thoughts on this topic, it would be better for an audience perspective to have r- thought all of this out beforehand and then work through it, think through it a couple days, a couple weeks, think through it with AI, rewrite it, shorten and concise, and then put the camera. But then there's the urgency factor of I need to be thinking about this stuff now. It se- Several of these items are and could be right around the corner, not only related to myself of whether or not I'll wake up tomorrow, but related to the world of whether or not the world will be here tomorrow. And I think the urgency in thinking through this results in the way in which this is presented as me narrating rather than having a more polished production. The next idea is something that I've thought about so often throughout my life. And you see this a lot when you're reading, when you're hearing a story, when you're um, watching a movie, that people really want and need to live for something real. So, for example, if you were to play out most science fiction stories, it's not necessarily the technology that makes the world better in the end. Technology is the functional method by which the world can become better. But it's really those narratives that shape how that technology is used. And a world where people can live the best life possible is not necessarily a world where they don't have to work because technology has eliminated all ideas of poverty. And so what I'm saying is even if you got to the point where there was ultimate abundance, that does not equate to people living the best life possible. In a world where meaning is still seemingly necessary and imagination and excitement and purpose seem to be highly needed aspects of humanity. In this area, it seems like the angelic hero could help. Then you also come to the idea of the evolution of humanity's nature and whether or not humans will evolve to not need purpose or not need meaning. The idea that people will live for something real for the foreseeable future is seems pretty obvious. In the current world we live in, there's not much that truly inspires. Most things are sort of figured out. So living for something real, let's think about that. Such a huge topic. One of the most important questions we can ask, it would seem, is not necessarily what are the scientific facts of the universe. But what is the true answer to a fulfilling life, to a meaningful existence, to something with purpose, happiness, and perhaps sadness, and the full spectrum of emotions, events, happenings? The scientific, it would seem, cannot address this question. Meaning, if we were to look at science right now, it basically would present that the world was spun out of a big bang, that the most of the things in the world are materialistic, and our life may or may not have any meaning outside of the meaning that we create for ourselves. And that itself is not very meaningful to live for. At some point, one has to create their own meaning, even in this very framework of the scientific framework. Perhaps this is done through religions. Perhaps this is done through, depending on one's personality, if they're content with with believing that the world is entirely materialistic. Perhaps there are other ways to think about this, and I think I will go read that as well because that is highly related to this. So yeah, let's talk about this in a group. So included including the idea of people wanting to live for something real. The idea that a champion is needed to make the change. We cannot really just expect things to happen well, and that technology and society and current leadership and AI will just work out for the best. So if we want a world where things are actively turning out for the best and we are shaping the future to the best thing it can be, it would seem that we would need to be the ones doing that, making it happen. This is a highly related aspect to the idea of the angelic hero. So the way that the angelic hero idea synergizes or blends with the idea of championing inspiration and helping people to live for something real. Now, this idea itself, okay, so if we were to take the angelic hero as its relation to championing change in relation to inspiring meaning, is that not just creating like meaning in life, just as any other religion or way of life that people decide to live upon? I think that is something that we should discuss. And then what are we actually saying would be a reason that people would potentially enjoy waking up every day? So this is related to that inspirational thing of that reason to live for something real, that is exciting, that is inspiring, that just feels real. And then you get into the aspect a little bit of internal, external motivations, which is also related to that making up a reason to live. You get to the sort of internal areas would be sort of self-actualization or the Stoic philosophies, which would seem to indicate that we need to shift our monitor of purpose and of meaning so that the things which we care about are only those things within our own control. So our own purpose, our own fulfillment comes from things which we can control in our lives. But then you get to the fact of whether that's possible. Perhaps that is itself a way of looking at the way of creating our own meaning, is to say that we will create our own meaning by having full control of it and controlling that which we can control. But perhaps we are in fact missing external meaning, which is the next part, is religion's nationalism. This is sort of the areas that it seems to be reflected. Would seem to indicate that external motivations, when done properly, can offer immense benefit. And so it seems, but then perhaps if you are religion and your purpose is tied to that, perhaps you're still connected to it in some personal, internal way, but it seems in large part you're missing that internal aspect, that self-actualized Stoic aspect. Okay, so we have a lot to think about here. What we really want to be thinking about here is how the angelic hero relates to these topics. The angelic hero, again, is the idea of someone, a group of people who are willing to sort of get through the initial complicatedness of dawning a new age of a world so immensely amazing that it's really impossible to fully describe. A lot of times we get so bored with our current lives that we just assume that that is a reflection of what's going to happen in the future. We see that most people that have ever lived have had boring lives, have not really accomplished that much in the grand scheme, that perhaps no one's accomplishments have ever mattered because there is no purpose. Yet this is not necessarily the way to think about it. And I think that is something that the angelic hero can do, is inspire based on not taking that assumption, but rather saying the future could be utterly amazing. Everything that has happened so far in the world that we know of so far is but a mere speck compared to the sun of light. So if we imagine a beam of light the size of a grain of sand, and then a globe of light the size of the sun, perhaps we're only living in that speck of light right now. And perhaps in the future, each one of us will live an absolutely amazing existence in that globe of light. Perhaps this is just fairy tale land, and this is where we get into the aspect of, would we just be creating a purpose? For example, I could theoretically imagine a world where we could create really authentic meaning and fulfillment via the whole element of the the movement coordinating mechanism, which again is sort of my overarching theory related to how the world could become the best place possible. But yet, perhaps true meaning fulfillment is something which we do not yet know about. Perhaps there is out there an actual. Perhaps we are living in a simulation now where it's impossible within that simulation to feel real purpose and fulfillment. And it's only until we escape the simulation that we get to a base root reality where that is shaped completely differently and that it's actually possible to have fulfillment and purpose and like the sense of a good life. This is definitely possible, and it comes down to the same assumption. Well, I guess first of all, yes, we cannot know. It is possible there is that it might never be possible for us to escape this simulation. Perhaps we need to spend all of our time trying to escape the simulation because there is a possibility that we are in the simulation and that there is some sense of purpose outside of it, some sense of true purpose. Once we find that ultimate external purpose, but then that ties into, do we need the external purpose? Can we do internal only? Or can we create our own external purpose? Or should we just assume that we're not living in a simulation and that we should just make the best of what we can currently see? I think the Angelic Hero is a pragmatic idea that we seek for the absolute highest possible outcome. We do not settle for any middle stage outcome. So in the end, we are seeking for the ultimate sense of purpose, the ultimate sense of meaning. If that cannot be reached in our current universe, because we are living in a simulation, then we will continue to search. We will continue to be on that maybe never ending path of finding true purpose. But certainly, just because we could be living, now it also depends. If we weight the idea that we are in a simulation heavily, then we will spend more of our time figuring out how to escape it than how to enable fulfillment and meaning given our current situation. And I think this is where the probability analysis comes into play once again, related to even if we are living in a simulation, there's no necessarily high reason that meaning and purpose would be in fact different outside of the simulation. And so it would seem not pragmatic to hold these hypothetical situations in our mind and therefore not concentrate on the current situation, creating meaning and fulfillment now, given what we know, and then continuing to evolve that. And at any given point, what is most probable to do that? If it becomes apparent that the most probable outcome that the most probable way in which we reach that world where we have ultimate fulfillment and motivation and meaning is through escaping the simulation, then that will become the main focus. But that is completely not a major item in the cards at the moment. And so we should concentrate on that which is real, which is current, while keeping all of these other possibilities in mind. So then we again seek to address the question of, are we not just creating our own meaning? And that devolved into thinking about whether we're in a simulation or not. But it is not clear that there is this ultimate sense of external motivation, meaning, and fulfillment. That there is this God or other situation which is enacting on all of humanity, all of the universe, this sense of external meaning and purpose. The only reflection of this type of thinking is the religions which have been created to sort of inspire this idea and thought process. But currently we do not live in a world where that is our reality. We do not wake up in the morning and engage with the ultimate sense of meaning. From my observance of all of humanity, very rarely have I ever seen anyone living in that sense of external meaning and fulfillment that is truly, truly fulfilled. And even in the sense of some religions such as Christianity, they would argue that this is impossible to have while living on earth, because heaven is where you will finally feel that sense of meaning and purpose, like fully, and that will be because you will be deriving it from the being which has created all purpose. So it instantly gets very complex. But it would seem obvious that there is no situation in which in the world there is a like anyone who engages in this sort of external meaning is like truly fulfilled. Like every human, it seems currently, does not experience this overwhelming sense of meaning and purpose. And that's where I'm saying the angelic hero can help. And the situation that we have to watch out for, and what I want to focus on, is not necessarily bringing about new technologies, not necessarily politics, not necessarily the technological aspect of the best world possible. Although I have thought a lot about those things, and I certainly think again they are functional. They would present the functional abilities to enact that which I truly am seeking, which is that sense of true meaning and purpose. Like in a world where everyone has everything, that does not equate to people being happy or fulfilled or the world being a great place. And that's why I've often simplified it down to the best place the world can be, the best world possible, the best version of yourself possible. Because perhaps the best version of yourself possible is not one that is living in complete fulfillment and purpose. It would seem likely that that be the case given my current observance of the world. And so I think that ranks so high in the probabilities that that's why I'm focusing on it right now. And that it would seem highly important to be my main purpose. Although I think still overriding that is the idea of the best world possible, which in where the word best in that scenario is defined in the best way possible. Meaning it's not just my opinion or anyone's real opinion, but an aggregate of all possible ways of thinking and discussing and emotionally digesting and whatnot. Any idea of what the best or future world could look like. And so then I discussed how this might be possible, whether, because this would be the idea of the angelic hero itself is something that has that true that is living their best life possible. So inherently they're really digging into self-actualization, concentrating on the things that they can control, like really caring about what they are doing, how they are doing it. And I think that will itself lead to a significant amount of internal purpose. But I think you get to this major item of external purpose. Throughout history and from what I've seen and from thoughts about what the future could look like, what really, because of the way the human mind works and human nature works, which again, this ties into, can human nature change? But it would seem like external motivation is such a significant factor of meaning and fulfillment, in the sense that if you are part of the whole, if you have that sense of belonging, and this also would relate to the hierarchy of needs, in which case the hierarchy of needs itself really lends itself to the idea of ultimately you're just looking for internal self-actualization. But part of that is this external component. And I've also thought a lot about the idea of utopia and what that would involve. Would it look a certain way? Would it be that in that best world possible, like the world is still pretty rough, but you have the ultimate ability and control of your own mind to sort of live a life of purpose? Or is it that the entirety of the environment is such that it is impossible not to sort of yourself be in a state of ultimate fulfillment and meaning? And this is sort of the idea of the external and internal. With the external motivation and meaning and purpose, that is sort of setting up the environment in which you are and in which you make decisions and can reflect your own sense of meaning. And so it just becomes very complex, and I'm trying to delve into just how complex this idea is, but again, trying to get pragmatic The angelic hero would be someone who can, or a group of people who can, at any given point, go for the best world possible, the best life possible. And whether that involves creating external purpose or not, doing whatever it is that actually is the, the best outcome, the best thing. Whether that's setting up the environment or whether it's not setting up the environment, whether it's enabling individuals to evolve themselves so that in any environment they would ever find themselves in, they can be an ultimate purpose and motivation. So, you've heard many stories about people being persecuted in religions and this sort of purpose and meaning that can provide them. That in like the worst possible circumstances, they have this utter sense of meaning and purpose. And I think often it is those situations of like war and devastation and persecution that people go back to the fundamentals of what actually gives them meaning. And in that moment is when they actually are highly connected with that sense of meaning and purpose. And that is when it seems is like the ultimate state of what one would seemingly like to live in. Although perhaps if persecution and whatnot are the only ways to achieve that level, then perhaps that's not ideal at the end of the day, because perhaps the persecution outweighs the sense of meaning that you derive from it, and so it's not worth it in the end. So what I'm saying is it's really impossible to know whether we should be creating, because in any sense, if there is an ultimate sense of purpose and meaning, it is impossible to know. Should we create our own? Is it better to create our own? It's impossible to know. Does it look like we're going to make much progress on finding external motivation and meaning in terms of something that is like an objective thing in reality? Of course, we will always be searching for that, but I think we have lived long enough on the world to know that that's not necessarily likely. And so then it comes down to creating our own. And it is an acknowledgement that we would be creating our own. We would be creating our own, which would mean that all of the thinking that we've been delving into related to the best world possible, that all goes into this very creation of our own movement of meaning and purpose, of the best meaning and purpose possible, of the best world possible. And we've thought about this idea so often and so heavily about what it even means to have the best world possible and whether that's actually what we want, and whether that itself is possible, and the idea that it is far better to try to bring that about than to assume that it's impossible and to not do anything, because if we do not try, it certainly will not come about. And it seems from all indications that the best world possible, where best is defined in the best possible way, that is like objective. It's very difficult to say that that's not in some sense objective. Like in the way that we use language, obviously it's hard to blanket statements like that. And that's perhaps why some might be more adverse to what I'm saying than others. Because in my mind, based on how I've had all of the context of the ideas of the best world possible, it is this. It is not necessarily the words itself of the best world possible, but this, but those words are the top of the iceberg, where the bottom of the iceberg is all of the sentiment behind, and all of the reasoning and thinking that I've done behind that aspect. And to me, it is this, one could picture it as the divine, the if we are to be angelic heroes, and obviously those are allegorical words in nature to begin with, but what are we to be angelic heroes about? It is the divine, then. That would be the allegorical uh, parallel. And the divine being that sense of best world possible, where it's this sentiment of not pressing down any idea of what actually we should be doing, what actually our life should look like, what the future should look like, any sense of meaning and purpose. It is the sense of an observation of all things, of being one with all things and saying, we cannot know, we will seek. I would have to think about this a lot more, because I hesitate to draw too heavy-handed parallels between aspects of religious jargon and this idea of the movement. But it would seem to make sense. The divine, I'm not a theological expert, but the divine is sort of that external thing which is the ultimate, this sense of ultimate. And that is the way I think about the best world possible. It is the ultimate. There is nothing less than an ever evolving toward the ultimate. There is no assertion of what is ultimate. It is the ever seeking of ultimate. It is the ever seeking of what ultimate means in an ultimate way. And I think that that this realization that the divine is a parallel here significantly. And now I can begin to see how this could take shape in a theoretical sense. Obviously, the actual inspiration of these ideas is a completely different matter of whether there's any possibility that I could play any role in this or not. The idea, the theoretical would remain the same. It is essentially a religion. Although I'm not sure if religion is the right sense. If it is like a religion, or if religions are like what I am trying to say. Throughout humanity, we have made various assertions of what the divine is and how we should respond to the divine. What if we stopped those assertions, which seems impossible? What if instead of assertions of what the divine is, the divine becomes that sentiment of the ultimate goodness for which we are seeking? I don't understand. This is becoming too highly symbolic of religion that I'm wondering if this strong parallel is because we are finally making a breakthrough, a true breakthrough in all of the years of thinking I've put into this, or whether there is no meaningful parallel, or whether this parallel is pointing to the fact that perhaps I have been on the trail of the divine, and that already is there and present in other religions. I think the third option is highly unlikely, although possible. I think the second option is possible. The first option would be possibly a turning point in my journey thus far. The divine, and there are so many things that are falling into place with this thought process of thinking about the ultimate world and going about seeking for the ultimate world in the best and ultimate way as being this conception of the divine. So many things are relating to this. Even as we think about this, core reason we were initially starting this conversation was relating to inspiration and purpose and meaning. People have been finding incredible amounts of purpose, meaning, fulfillment in representations of the divine in various religions, which often do not are human assertions of what they are. Perhaps the greatest breakthrough that humans will make is finally creating their own divine, but not in the sense of humans themselves are divine or some random set of goals are divine, but that this essence. So, I, I mean, you could materialize this a bit by saying that all I'm doing is saying that I'm creating this idea of the divine, which my definition would be the true essence of the ultimate, where the ultimate is something that is not defined or asserted by humans, and it is the ultimate. But then, even in saying that, you're asserting that ultimate is somehow like the idea of the ultimate, is itself the ultimate thing. It's language is making this difficult. Because the Angelic Hero is the idea of it was in large part related to being a selfless individual who just wants to live the best life they can live, to help make the world the best it can be, and when I say the best life possible and the best world it can be, I'm not trying to use my own definition of best. I'm trying to say that which is best. Where best is not a word which is necessarily that the typical definition of best, where best is like, where it's like best and like ultimate are like tied together. Perhaps I need to think about this quite a bit more in order to get better with the terminology. But yes, I've had this sense of the best world possible, the best life possible for quite a while. That was my way of understanding what I was actually trying to achieve. I was trying to achieve, and then I talk all the time about how this should be evolving, about how maybe in the future the definition does not become the best world possible, but the worst world possible, because worst becomes the the best representation of what we should actually be seeking for, based off of everything that we understand about reality. And perhaps in that case, we could still use the word best, because best itself would represent the idea of worst. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but I think some people might understand what I'm saying. It is this okay, how might this pragmatically change a lot of what I'm currently doing with these endeavors and the world going forward? Given that I will think big, I will not limit myself to that which appears too difficult, or that which I am bored about because it has not worked in the past. I always hesitate anything related to ideas that are parallel in nature to religion, with the potential of creating something that could be absolutely devastating, and that somehow I would be responsible for that. I am highly adverse to that. But again, let's not let that distract us from what could actually happen. From most evidences, and I'm not trying to assert my own beliefs here, I'm not trying to. If there was something else more obvious, I would do that. And I think this is perhaps why I am good for this, because somehow, some way, even though there are likely many things upon which I have cognitive dissonances and cognitive issues with the way that I'm even thinking about any of this because of how I was born and my genes and what I have learned so far in life. But given all of that, it seems like I seek for the ultimate. I do not settle for that which people have always believed or that which people think is the correct thing. I am seeking for the ultimate. The ultimate does not necessarily parallel with objective. So that's a framing for, it seems in reality that all religion is human created sense of meaning, fulfillment, purpose. In the idea where religion is not necessarily the base level of the term, it is this idea of this narrative structure around which people find this essence. It seems to be all human designed. In this world where we seek to inspire, and this could get cyclical in nature, in this world where we are trending toward possible disasters, where we know that we could be trending toward amazing things, where most people desire to be trending toward the great things and to avoid the disastrous outcomes. We come to this wall of what to do next. Do we continue with the current structures of religions? Do we continue with the materialistic, science-based thought process of how to continue in terms of no real attempt to provide that true sense of purpose and meaning, where purpose and meaning is not necessarily scientific itself, but which clearly is a significant feature of reality? Is it not obvious that humans have been inspiring toward this sense of the divine, where the divine in most religions is that thing which is ultimate, the creator, the savior, the ultimate being in charge, the author, and basically the ultimate. The humans have been inspiring toward the ultimate, yet we have been continuously asserting what the ultimate is. In every religion, we write a book asserting what that ultimate is, and yet when we evaluate it in today's age, we see it for what it is. It's not the ultimate. And that is what is so disappointing about it, and why so many people are depressed right now. Because to them there is no ultimate. No one in the world currently seems to be offering any sense of the ultimate. And everything that they are offering as ultimate is a human assertion of that which is ultimate. What if there was some way of conveying properly what I am understanding as the ultimate? Which is, and this is where human language becomes an issue, the divine, it would seem, should be the ultimate. where we do not assert what that is. We observe what most probably is ultimate, where ultimate itself, its definition, is what most probably should be its definition. This seems to be a meld of the scientific and the religious ideals that humans have been relating to. Humans have found great life purpose from religions because it offers that external sense of the ultimate. There is an ultimate out there for which they can strive, from which they can derive their purpose. Yet, if you look at it too closely, as I have done and many in the modern world have done, you see that it is not the ultimate. And so you get dissatisfied. And you say, that ultimate is not the ultimate. That is a facade. That is not true. That is meaningless. That is negative. And then you look to the scientific, the materialistic, which does not provide any sense. Like, it really cannot even potentially offer a solution to what is ultimate, because that idea is mostly philosophical in nature, mostly that essence of what philosophical means in nature. But yet the science can offer us a way of evaluating what is the divine? What could the divine mean? If there is divine, and science and like math and like logic and reason, that's what I'm representing. That allows us to look and understand what the divine is. Is the divine actually divine? Is it actually ultimate? And using those reasoning frameworks, we've said, okay, no, that is not the ultimate. And so we are dissatisfied. Most of the world is living in dissatisfaction. And this is why many who are religious, who are more fulfilled, often are not as intellectually involved with the conversation because they are just choosing to be content. Yet, obviously, if you're not intellectually engaged enough to even involve yourself with whether or not your sense of divine is the ultimate, then you have other issues in which your life would not be that great. But then once you reach past the point and you're willing to engage intellectually, you see that that ultimate is not the ultimate. And so either way, there is no ultimate for you. There is no ultimate present for you. And this is where I think the Angelic Hero could help immensely by offering to humanity a way of understanding that which is the true divine. Because truly, when you're even evaluating a religion, and you get into the issue of like, okay, but if we're relying on reason to determine what is the divine, but then depending on what is the divine will reflect how reason is represented, you get to this really cyclical thing, which and that's why this is so complicated. But I think if there is a way to break this down in a reasonable sense, and again I say reasonable sense, in a sense which seems true, that you are constantly updating based off of your current level of reason, where your reason is not necessarily is as objective as possible somehow, because we currently understand objectivity as that which can most likely be truthful. You determine what is the divine. From that reflection of the divine, you update your reason once again. And based off of that reasoning, you reevaluate what is the divine. And you can continue to go back and forth. And I think it will ever be a back and forth, because reason and the divine are linked but not the same. And you seem to need both. They are dependent structures. The reason and divine seem to be dependent structures. Because you get in this situation where, in order to determine what is the divine, you must use reason. To determine, and then you must go back. To determine what is reason, you must use the divine. Okay, I feel an overall sense that, again, this is another idea that I've thought of. I also think that perhaps what truly is that breaking point in life is not this overwhelming moment of, yes. Although I feel that a little bit. I've felt that so often lately, over the years, that I've convinced myself that just because I feel that way does not indicate that that's actually the case, that I've actually reached this sense of, okay, this is the turning point that I've been waiting for. But it's possible. And I don't want to assume that this isn't the turning point that I've been waiting for. All right. So excited to think about this more. The divine related to the angelic hero.